Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for the introduction. You got to know me through my bio. I'd like to get to know a little bit about you, the audience. So it's the fact that you're here and you've marched for peace and justice. How many of you get your information and news mainly from U.S. media? Raise your hand, please.
U.S. media.
Okay. How many of you made a public position calling for ceasefire or marched calling for ceasefire? Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Josh, for your kind thoughts. I really appreciate that. A little bit about myself. I guess you all know that I was born in Gaza, but I have a connection to Tariq because I am originally from Jaffa. This is where my father, God rest his soul, is from. And in 1948, along with his family, they were ethnically cleansed, not forced out, ethnically cleansed out of Jaffa, because people were massacred in the center of Jaffa. And for decades, Israel denied such a massacre until a few years where the mass grave was found. So my father with his family went to Gaza. I call it Gaza because that's the Arabic name for it. And good, I'm glad we finally agree on something. And that's where he met my mom, and that's where I was born. So basically, I was made a refugee before I was born. And I lived as a refugee until I chose to come to the U.S. to make the U.S. my home, hoping and thinking that it is the land of the free, and that I would be able to exercise my right as a human being. But sadly, I'm learning a lot of things in those 30 plus years that I have lived here. For 32 years, I have been participating in interfaith dialogue and in building bridges and hoping to build a better community right here in LA. And I built friendship, I had friends, we broke bread together, we spoke, we marched, we did so many things calling for peace. Until October 7 happened. And everything and everywhere in this city, in this country, was we stand with Israel. We stand with Israel became the new God that everybody are praying for. No mention of Palestinians. Yes, it was mentioned that I lost family members. I literally lost count after the 150 mark. Each and every one of them has a story. Each and every one of them was loved. I can only tell you two of the stories. Ata, my cousin's eldest son. They couldn't even find his body. They had to collect pieces so that they could bury him after he was bombed in the house where he was, after he fled the city of Gaza. Literally, they couldn't find his body. He was blown into pieces, like so many of the Palestinians in Gaza. My other cousin, Yusuf, he's married to my cousin Mariam. He's a prominent dentist in Gaza. And after how many months of being displaced one time after the other, he was on my list of the GoFundMe that I was supposed to get him out. Except he couldn't make it because Israel decided to target his father, who was a prominent pediatric surgeon, one who started the Department of Pediatric Surgery at the Shifa Hospital. As Israel targeted all doctors, targeted all signs of civilization in Gaza, be it doctors, be it hospitals, be it schools, and the list is on and on. Hospitals, we're not alone. Mosques, churches. There was no safe space for anybody to be in Gaza. But it didn't really start on October 7th. For anybody who thinks that Hamas attacked Israel, and how dare they? After 75 years of colonization, occupation, dehumanization of Palestinians, and 17 plus years of siege of Gaza, where Gazans had no control over anything in their life. They had no control on the air, on the land, on the borders, on the sea. They couldn't do anything. Talking about concentration camp, Gaza was worse than a concentration camp.
Yes.
And if everybody hear that it is Israel against Hamas, Hamas is not in the West Bank. Yet what is happening in Jenin, all over the West Bank, is nothing less. In Jenin, particularly Jenin. Jenin looks like a twin sister of Gaza. Check the news. Definitely not US media, but the news is out there. I appreciate this opportunity for us to come and talk together. But I tell you, after 32 years of my life that I devoted to the city, to the interfaith, to coming together, to building bridges, to building relationships, not a single interfaith body that I served on came out and called for ceasefire. Thank God for Eric, after 5 months in February, a statement came out, and I appreciate that. Better late than never. I'll meet you anywhere at any time as long as you come to the fact that we need a ceasefire. You cannot tell me, that you are true to your faith, just as Eric mentioned. Eric, you mentioned Zach, you mentioned Rabbi Sharon Brous. None of them came out and called for ceasefire publicly. Maybe in private, I have no clue. In my conversation with Zach and I asked him, his answer was, it's complicated. There's nothing complicated about calling for protecting of lives. Not just Palestinian lives, but Israeli lives as well. The hostages who came out alive only came out during a ceasefire, which tells you who is really interested in them coming out alive or not. But that's another story. So when we say sharing pain, sharing humanity, I'm not really sure what does that mean. Those of you who stood for ceasefire, those of you who marched, and those of you who spoke, we have shared humanity. But those who didn't, I'm not sure we do. Because if we don't stand for one another, if we do not really, not just talk, because talk is cheap, if we're not really standing for our faith and taking action to protect lives, then we're not being true to the God Almighty who created us and gave us these commandments. And I wonder how we will all stand in front of God at the day of judgment and answer that. Doing the minimum is good, but doing the minimum is not good enough when already 600 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza, 500 have been killed, more than 15,000 children, 10,000 plus are missing, not counting those who were arrested, taken hostage into Israel. And as of this morning, the news came out that about 36 of them, 360 of them have died. Really? Died? Just died? Not tortured and killed? And I don't want to even get into the numbers of the West Bank. And yet we're watching all this in real time. The excuse the world had about the Holocaust is that we didn't know. We really didn't know. This is why no one lifted a finger. Well, what is happening in Gaza is happening in real time. Anyone and everyone has a phone. And the information is out there. That's why Israel is trying to suppress and kill all journalists so that nothing comes out. They're not allowing international journalists to go in. And it is interesting that from hearing from everybody, not once I heard the word genocide.
Yes.
Why? Why? Do you agree that what is happening in Gaza is genocide? If you do,
Yes.
please raise your hand.
Absolutely.
God bless you. Thank you. Because it is. It is a genocide. If we are to protect the life, we are to protect everyone. Jews lived in Palestine. My father, God rest his soul, used to tell me about the story when he lived in Jaffa, where his neighbor to the right, who he used to call uncle, was a Palestinian Christian. Probably, not his grandfather. And his neighbor to the left, who he still used to call uncle, was a Palestinian Jew. But that all changed with the Zionist movement. And we can discuss, Zionism at a later time, because the definition that probably the Jews or the Israelis have, because not all Jews agree on that definition. Their definition of Zionism is totally different from mine. Zionism is a colonial movement to take over Palestine.
Yes.
And while Jews have the right to live in Palestine, and they will and would be protected, as they were, because the whole world rejected the Jews when they escaped Europe. Even this country didn't allow them to come down the ships at Staten Island. And the one country that welcomed them was Palestine.
Yep.
And yet, Palestinians are paying the price. For what? For being kind? For being welcoming? The point that keeps coming in those discussions, regarding Israel, Israel has the right to defend itself. No! Israel does not have the right to defend itself. Woo! Not my word. Not my word. It is the international law. The international law states that an occupier is responsible for the safety and the well-being of the occupied.
That's right.
But Israel doesn't really care. Does Israel really care about any of the international laws? No, it doesn't. Israel doesn't even care about the laws of this country. How many times did our president come out and said, we're asking, we're demanding, we're this, we're that, and what does the Israeli government say? We don't really care. Just give us the money, give us the weapons, and shut up. And this is where we have the responsibility to take action.
Yep.
Being silent is being complicit in this genocide.
Yep.
We have to speak out. We have to call for ceasefire. And we have to take a stand to really revisit what we call as the interfaith dialogue. I remember back in 2021, during COVID, I remember, There were attacks on Gaza, as always. Almost every year, every Ramadan, I brace myself because Gaza will be attacked and Gaza will be demolished. And there were demonstrations all over the world, including right here in the city of LA. And it was in the news where some demonstrators, supposedly carrying the Palestinian flag, attacked some Jews on the streets of LA, and there was an uproar. I stood next to the mayor, next to all the city officials and the interfaith, and I condemned violence, whether here on the streets of LA or violence in Gaza, violence in Jerusalem. And everybody pushed for it to be tried as a hate crime. And then nothing happened. You really didn't hear about it until a couple of years later. There was actually an article in a Jewish newspaper or a Jewish news outlet, and it did mention that the charges were dropped. It was the Jews who were the instigators, and the Palestinians, those with the Palestinian flag, were protecting themselves. And everything dropped. Yep. But not a single mention in the media. The same media that had an uproar. So yes, as Aziza mentioned, Palestinians' lives don't matter. I marched with all of you, with all the faith leaders, calling for protecting our fellow Black American citizens. We all marched and we said, Black lives matter. We counted the seconds George Floyd was with the policeman, his knee on George Floyd's neck. We all did that together. We all stood and we all said, enough is enough. I didn't see that happen after the genocide in Gaza. All the groups that I have spent 32 years of my life working with, none of them came out and publicly said, let's march. Let's go knock on the mayor's office or knock on City Hall, all together as people of faith. That didn't happen. I almost lost faith, literally lost faith in my interfaith work until God Almighty sent me a group in Pasadena. We call ourselves now Pasadena for Palestine. Different groups, different faiths. We come together as family, children, youth, men, women, all ages. And we all come together and every Monday, we've been doing that from mid-October till today, rain or shine. We come together and we say, enough. And we call for ceasefire, we call for end of occupation, and we call for end of the genocide. Israel will not heed, will not listen to anyone in the world because really they think they are over and above everybody.
Yep.
If they think they are over and above our own president, when our own president tells them, enough, don't enter Rafah, don't do this, don't do that. And yet, the day after our president came out and presented the so-called Israeli/Netanyahu's deal, what does Israel do? Go to Rafah, that is condensed with people. And what do? They bomb Rafah with the same weapons that Biden said, we're not sending them. They burned Palestinians alive in their tents. That's what Israel does. So what will get this genocide to end? Only Biden can do it, by the way.
Yep.
Except maybe before Biden, God, and I'm still waiting for that miracle. Believe me, I have conversations with God on a daily basis, and I'm still waiting for his miracle. But God is testing us. And God gave us the opportunity, which sadly, we all failed. Not all of us, some of us. Those of us who came and spoke, we did our best and may God accept. But those who sat thinking they're doing their best and not coming out and calling for ceasefire publicly to their congregation, on their own, we failed that opportunity. So, how do I end? We're entering the 9th month of this genocide. Just imagine, 9th month. And at the beginning, pain consumed me, but I couldn't even mourn my family. It was happening so fast that I couldn't even sit with myself and mourn my family. And week after week, not a single week passed without someone being killed. My pain became anger. My anger can go around the world multiple times. But I pray and I seek refuge in God that my anger does not turn into hate.
Yep.
Which can easily happen.
Yep.
I am yet to see people of faith and my fellow Jews condemn the hate that I see coming out of Israel. When settlers protected by the Israeli army stand at the border, Rafah, preventing aid trucks from entering Gaza. Not only that, but burning those aid trucks. While people in Gaza are facing man-made forced starvation. And yet, not a single condemnation. Why? Back to what Aziza said. Obviously, Palestinian lives don't matter. And when people call me and tell me, Hedab, we really feel for you, we want to come and give you our condolences, I said, it doesn't matter. It's not about me. It's not about my feelings. It's about the people in Gaza who are being massacred. Don't do anything for me. I don't want you to do anything for me. I want you to take a stand for the people who really need you and need your voice and need your position to call for a ceasefire, call for an end to the occupation, call for an end to this genocide. But I do believe when doors closed, other doors open. If there is hope for the interfaith, if there is hope for the peace of justice, we have to switch it first for it to say justice and peace. Because peace will not be attained without justice first. So far, we've been dancing around the world, the word peace, without even giving it a definition. My definition of peace probably is different than Josh, different than Aziza, and different from each and every one of you. We probably need to go back to the drawing table, back to basics. And the basics of what God Almighty had ordained on all of us. Let's be true to our faith by action, not by words. Thank you and God bless.